Welcome back to Season 5 of Porcelain Peak, your strange and scary podcast featuring Chop Talk, trivia, and deep dive main discussions into the odd and unusual.
So deep, so unusual.
This week, we are going to be talking about some news about Star Wars and the Daniels. Then we're going to play trivia, see if we can get this maniac off his giant fucking
He's
streak.
a maniac in the triv.
And for our main discussion, we are wrapping up March Madness.
March Madness!
Witness me!
Talking about Mad Max Fury Road, and I am very happy to get out of this so we can all quit hearing that shit. Anyway, I'm one of your hosts. I'm Anthony. I'm joined by
John.
And I almost said Tone.
Oh, I got you.
I was going to mix it up on you. And Anthony.
Yeah.
Internet
I go
darling,
by Tone or the
better
Blob.
known.
Anyway, that's what we're doing, so stay tuned, and we'll go ahead and get started with that Chop Talk.
Why don't you take an axe and chop it open?
Before we dive into that Star Wars and Daniels news, how are you fellas?
I'm pretty good. The weather is crazy. The weather in LA, it's fucking
Central Valley.
It's fucking insane.
Weather
over here.
outside is frightful.
It is, yeah. It was hailing for a long time. Feels like my house is going to fall apart.
Yeah, we Californians are not at all equipped for this kind of apocalyptic weather. Yeah, I have been doing pretty well. Had a pretty stressful day, but I had this to look forward to.
Yeah, this to look forward to.
And I'm excited for us to be wrapping up March Madness. As much as I have dug the shit out of the Mad Max movies, I'm excited to move on to greener pastures up in the trees, bro.
Oh, shit. Little hint, hint.
Little hint, hint.
Good. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, too.
Yeah.
Happy to see you guys. I'm on spring break.
Spring break.
It's fucking awful. I can't do anything. So that sucks.
Yeah.
But anything's better than
You mean you're not
working,
going
I
to get your bikini out and go sit in the hail?
I should, yeah. And really just offend everybody.
Yeah.
Right on. So, Star Wars,
Yeah.
what's up? What are they doing? Mandalorian's out. Been pretty okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new. Wait, no, is it Wednesdays? Is it tomorrow?
Yeah, I think probably late tonight, but
Oh,
if
okay.
it's-
I haven't watched episode 3 yet, so.
Well, not Mandalorian related, but there is another Star Wars project in the works called Skeleton Crew. You guys heard about this? You guys seen anything
I
about
feel like I
this?
have heard about this.
It is set in the same time period as The Mandalorian,
Okay.
but it's supposed to be some sort of coming-of-age tale. It is going to be starring Jude Law, and I'm like, I'm sure it's not a coming-of-age tale about Jude Law's character because that man's old as Dumbledore at this point. But I got a little bit scared when I first saw this news because it's been announced by the Daniels that they are going to be directing an episode of this series. When I first saw the news, I thought that they were going to be making a Star Wars movie, and I was just like, please don't, because this is, tale as old as time at this point.
Plucked from obscurity.
Plucked from, seeming obscurity. They're obviously not obscure at this point anymore with
Oscar winners.
yeah, but, they get to that point, and then one of these, Disney usually comes in and is like, cool, now we're going to go have you make a cookie cutter franchise project bullshit.
Unless you're the Russo brothers.
Yeah, who produced Everything Everywhere All at Once. So, little connection there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but they are going to be directing just one episode, so not much news beyond that outside of what I told you about Skeleton Crew. We don't know when it's going to come out, but I also saw a little bit of news, and I wasn't sure if it was real or not, but I saw something that said that Michael Haneke would also be directing an episode. He's the guy who did Funny Games, both versions.
Funny games, all kinds.
Yeah, and usually does all kinds of weird, fucked up shit. So I'm like, hey, if Daniels and Michael Haneke are directing episodes of this show, it's probably going to be weird as fuck, and I'm on board for it.
That sounds weird. They just need Moorhead and, is it Benson?
Yeah.
From the Endless?
Well, they are actually, this wasn't on my list, but if you were Benson and Moorhead fans, like I am, they're actually going to be moving into TV, and they have hopes to make a TV show set in the same universe as their, like, Endless and Resolution
Oh, wow.
movies, like with those same characters that they played in those movies. So if you're a fan and you follow that kind of stuff, Steven, I'm talking directly to you because we talk about this all the time. We will be looking for all the little Benson and Moorhead Easter eggs. But
Yeah. Well, they did a little bit of work on Moon Knight, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of already dipped their toe
well,
in
so
the
that's
water.
what I'm kind of. To me, I'm hoping that this is Daniels maybe dipping their toe into working on a TV production, and then maybe I wouldn't be mad about them then going, okay, now we're going to go off and do a Daniels, straight up Daniels crazy TV show.
Yeah.
And make something really awesome. I just don't want them, and they wouldn't. I mean, at this point, they seem like they have their heads on as straight as they could be for the Daniels.
Yeah.
But they seem to know, like, I doubt they're just gonna be like, okay, now we're gonna go do Marvel movies and Star Wars movies and stuff. And plus, like, I can't fault people who have probably, I'm sure, been massive Star Wars fans their entire lives for them to get the chance to like do an episode of a Star Wars TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Why would they pass that up?
Yeah, I don't think that they're in a place where they have to feel like they need to go out and chase the bag. I think that they probably made a
The bag's been got.
Yeah, they made a shit ton of money with the most awarded film that's ever been created. So
Yeah, and then moving on to other projects that we hope see the light of day. Guillermo del Toro, we talked about this a little bit. You had mentioned on, I think, in our Oscar discussion when we talked about Pinocchio and how happy we were for him for winning that. You're like, man, he's just got to make that fucking Frankenstein movie. Well, he does have a deal with Netflix, and like I said, he does have an animated project in the works with Netflix. But now apparently things are potentially moving forward with his adaptation of Frankenstein. Right now, people who are in talks, semi-confirmed for it, are Mia Goth. Surprise, surprise.
I'm shocked.
Not mad about it though. Oscar Isaac, also not mad about it. Speaking of Moon Knight, and Andrew Garfield, definitely not mad about it. I don't know in what roles in the Frankenstein universe they would be playing, but
We
I'll
need
be very...
someone, if he's going Mary Shelley, he's got to get someone pretty big, at least tall, to play the creature.
Yeah,
Great
I could.
nose.
Because isn't he supposed to be like 8 feet or some shit?
Yeah, but that's also something that you could do with like camera trickery
Yeah.
or CG, and also Pan's Labyrinth, like, put some stilts on him and make him like some big monster creature.
So of those three, I'm assuming that Mia is Elizabeth, which makes the most sense, I guess, for early casting, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really does depend on how close to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein he's trying to go, because I mean, obviously, Mia Goth could play Frankenstein the Doctor,
totally,
and go all like kind of mad crazy, and depending on what kind of adaptation he's doing, I could also
Mia Goth
see
could be the monster. Who knows?
I could also see Oscar Isaac playing I mean, really any of these people I could see playing any of the characters. So I'm interested to see where it goes. It just makes me nervous that it's Netflix, because no plans that they ever have these days seem to last more than a week to 2 weeks before
Unless
they
your name
change or
is
get
Stranger
canceled or
Things.
shuffled around. But again, similar to what we were saying with Daniels, he just won Netflix an Oscar. So the likelihood of them letting him do this is a bit higher now than it was before, that Sunday night a couple weeks ago. Another creator that we really like, that I'm sure we're all looking forward to their next project, is Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele. I heard about this one.
His fourth film is slated for a December 2024 release. So December next year, we're getting whatever his new project is going to be. No real details beyond that as to what it is, but I'm excited.
Good for him. He's cranking stuff out.
I'm just happy to hear he's got something new in the works. And then let's see what else we got. Shazam. Did you see Fury of the Gods?
I did not. I've heard it's no buenos.
It's bad.
Yeah, I've heard it's not good.
Oh,
Yeah, so
was the first one was okay?
The first one was fun.
I liked it. I never had a desire to go rewatch it, but I remember really enjoing it when I saw it in theaters.
It was the dude that directed Lights Out. Is he back this time?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah, so David F. Sandberg, he did Lights Out. He did Annabelle Creation, which I think is the best of the Annabelle movies.
100%.
And made his name like with his Pony Smasher channel with the Lights Out short and those other shorts that he did with his wife. And so I knew him first as a horror guy, and that's part of why I was so excited about Shazam. And then Shazam just ended up being real fun and funny.
A great example of what you were talking about earlier. Plucked right out.
But that's what made me kind of nervous was, I was like, oh shit, now he's doing another Shazam. And Shazam's not doing super well. There's been a lot of news surrounding why that might be. A lot of people are saying that it could be because people liked the first Shazam, but maybe not enough to be super interested in what Shazam was going to be doing in a sequel. Other theories are that it's that whole thing we were talking about with people just being burnt out on superhero stuff, and especially after getting Quantumania, which was okay.
Could also be that they now know that DC is not building up to anything, so it's like, well,
that's the other thing, is like, you know,
it's a dead end.
People are probably just like, yeah, why bother, because this isn't going to go anywhere.
On top of that, there was also, I'm sure this is probably where some of the news is leading, but a ton of drama behind the scenes between
the continued downfall of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and
between
his
The Rock
public
and
image.
between Zachary Levi.
Oh, is he in this movie?
No, so Black Adam is a Shazam character. He's a Shazam villain.
Right.
He's Shazam's like main villain, and that's, you know, and they get their powers from the same guy, like they have the lightning bolt and everything, but for whatever reason, Dwayne Johnson was adamant about wanting to like remove Black Adam as much. Yeah, he was Black adamant about wanting to remove that character as much from Shazam as possible. So he like put his foot down and refused to make any cameo appearances in Shazam.
Refused to allow Zachary
Levi to make a cameo in Black Adam to connect the movies. And then originally the Justice Society characters like Hawkman and them were going to show up at some point in the Shazam movie, and Dwayne Johnson was like, no, you can't fucking do that. And so they had to like last minute switch those characters out with some other characters, which I won't go too deep into because it's potentially spoilerific if you haven't seen the movie. And so people are like, also Dwayne Johnson has just been, you know, sabotaging these last couple DC movies and
sabotaging franchises in general, according to the people who make the Fast and the Furious movies.
Yeah.
And
that's why they did the spinoff.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of people are starting to realize that it seems like he is just on a massive ego trip, thinking that he's the biggest shit in the world. And he was the one who, you know, we talked about kind of fucked Henry Cavill over by like demanding that he be in the movie and demanding that the studio, you know, make something work with him just for it to all turn around and blow up in Henry Cavill's face. And a lot of people are saying it's just because Johnson must have just asked somebody on the street, like, who's a superhero or a supervillain that can beat Superman? Oh, Black Adam probably could. Cool. That's the character I'm going to play, and I'm going to make sure I get Superman into the movie so that we can have a fight so that I can win because Johnson,
I'm Superman.
because I'm Dwayne Johnson and I have to win against Superman. Like, how cool would that be if I could tell people that I fucking beat Superman?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, so you're just going to fuck over everybody else's stuff.
Everything I've heard about him before all this was that he was like the nicest fucking dude. So it's weird.
Yeah, it is very strange, but you never know about people.
Yeah.
We don't really know. But what this all kind of leads to, what I think is more interesting for us, is that Sandberg has been very communicative throughout the release of this movie on Twitter and stuff about how he feels about the DC universe and this movie and everything. And he's basically like, yeah, I made a movie that I really like. I'm really proud of it. It's sad to see that people don't really like it. He said that's disappointing. Also, he was like, I am going to go back to horror now. He was like, I really have been wanting to for a while now. And he's like, and that doesn't mean I regret making the Shazam movies. He's like, I met a lot of great people. I learned a lot about how to make big movies. And he's like, I love those characters in those movies, but he pretty much said, like, I'm sick and tired of the discourse around these movies and how much drama there is on the internet around the DC movies.
I mean, unfortunately for him, he's going to the next like most discussed genre of movies.
Yeah, with like the second worst discourse. But so he's like, I want to go back to horror, make some smaller stuff that's more like back to my roots. It doesn't mean it's the only thing I'm gonna do. But he was like, yeah, I think that's the direction I'm gonna head in, and James Gunn and them can go ahead and do their own thing. Ben Affleck also said recently in an interview that he is definitely not going to be directing anything for James Gunn's DC universe.
Did he say why? Like, is he bitter?
Well, he did a whole interview about how he basically almost killed him, like actually almost killed himself while working with. So basically, working with Joss Whedon to get Justice League finished drove him into deep alcoholism and was part of what ruined his marriage and all of that stuff. Whoa. And then having to come in and do reshoots
with Zack Snyder.
And be away from his family more made him so miserable that he was basically just drinking and going to kill himself. And so he is kind of, it seems, but he said that he finally figured out how to play the version of Batman he always wanted to play in, like, and he even said in the interview, in the 5 minutes I'm in the new Flash movie, it's the best of version of Batman I've ever played. So he's like, I'm happy I finally got to play that version of Batman, but after that, I'm done. And he basically like very vaguely said, I'm just not interested in the direction that James Gunn is taking the universe, and it doesn't really fit with the kind of movie I would want to direct for a DC universe. So I'm just not gonna. And,
That's cool though.
yeah, and overall, I thought it was sad to hear that about his experience on those movies, but he's got other shit going on, and he seems like a cool dude who just went through some shit, and if he needs to take a break and go,
Smart.
he's doing that movie with Damon. You know, he's like, I'm gonna go make a movie with my friend,
About Jordans.
the Nike one,
About
Air.
but not about Michael.
No, and then the last bit of news I had, I always want to try to put this at the end, these kind of things at the end, because they're sad, but Lance Reddick passed away. You probably recognize him from the John Wick movies. He's the desk guy at the hotels. I was like, Mr. Wick. And you've seen him in a
From
million other
Fringe.
things from Fringe.
Yeah, we talked about that on our
And
bonus
from the
episode.
new Resident Evil show that came out, and a million other things.
Oh.
Including he was a voice actor for the Destiny video games as well. Was an avid player, and
Yeah, he would actually just like go into lobbies or whatever and like just play with people and do the voice, from the game and everything. And
so from what I've heard, apparently players of the game have been holding candlelight vigils in the game around his character.
from literally everything I've seen about the guy, he sounded like he was straight up the coolest, nicest person ever. Like people are devastated about it. And
Wow. Is he in the new movie? Do we know?
yeah,
Okay.
because because he just did an interview where he was saying that like one of the first days of shooting on the new John Wick, it was his birthday, Reddick's birthday.
Oh, nice.
And Keanu wasn't supposed to be on set that day because it wasn't a scene with Wick in it.
So we got the two nicest dudes going to battle right now, or what?
So and he ended up showing up. Keanu came with his girlfriend to the set to watch Lance like do his scenes and stuff, just so that he could wish him a happy birthday. And he was like, yeah, I know I didn't need to be here, but like I wanted to wish you a happy birthday and like tell you how talented you are and how happy I am to have you like still doing these with me and everything. And so yeah, really sad news, but I did want to a little glimmer of hope for people who really like his work. He did finish recording the role of Hellboy for an upcoming video game called Hellboy Web of Weird. So if you're a Hellboy fan and you like Lance Reddick, I mean, he's got the perfect voice for that character.
Yeah.
So check out that game. I don't know if he has any other film projects or TV projects that were filmed before he passed, but either way, rest in peace, my friend. It makes me, very excited to see his performance in the newest John Wick, but a little bit bittersweet.
Yeah, that's going to definitely affect me when I go see it.
Yeah.
When I have already seen it, because this is pre-recorded. I know me. I'll be seeing it. All right, great. Anything else?
No, let's get out of the sad news and get into the competition.
All right, cool. That was going to wrap it up for Chop Talk. We'll get started with that trivia.
That Christmas house of wax, the fog, piranha. It's one of those, right? Right?
Before we get started with Trivial Pursuit Horror Movie Edition, we had a bonus question last week. Anthony, you want to remind us what that was?
Yeah, I've got a trivia question for you. Do you think that you can answer it correctly?
I don't know what I said. All right, it's too late. We already answered it.
So call me the Triveler.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. My question last week was: Warner Brothers gave the rights to The Road Warrior and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome to
I want that now.
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet 3 Beyond Thunderdome.
to George Miller. He'd probably make it because he made like Happy Feet and shit. He'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna make Beyond Thunderdome. So they gave the rights to those movies to George Miller if he agreed to step down from directing what 1997 sci-fi film?
Oh, fuck. I do not remember what I said. I think I said The X-Files.
Yeah, you did.
I don't remember what I said either.
Well, we had two guesses from Ben from Extreme Horror Replay Podcast. Thank you for listening, Ben. Always appreciate your comments.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
His first guess was The Matrix, which I think is the wrong year.
99.
So wrongo. And his other guess was Sphere, which you were so close, buddy. You thought that came out in 97. Turns out that was in 98. So everybody was wrong. The movie was Contact from 1997.
Is that what Jodie Foster?
Yep. Yeah, so
why did they want him to step down so badly?
creative differences. I guess he had like a radically different idea for how he wanted to do the story and do the movie. And,
Radical, dude.
so they brought in Robert Zemeckis to replace him to make, I think, a lot more. I haven't seen Contact, but it seems to me it was probably a case of
Like a more commercial.
yeah, they wanted to
sci-fi.
make a more straightforward, like audience crowd pleasing
Yeah.
sci-fi movie. So yeah, it was Contact from 1997. But
Nice.
I do have a new trivia question, and I'm thinking far into the future with this one.
Okay.
And by far into the future, I mean next week's recording.
Okay. Well, that's usually how these work.
Yeah. So your trivia question is: Le Planète des Singes,
Okay.
known in English as Planet of the Apes,
Yeah.
was released that way. The novel originally was released that way in the U.S. It was called Planet of the Apes. What was it called in the United Kingdom? It did have a different title.
Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Bruvs.
Because you're such a big Apes fan and a book geek. I was trying to think of the nicest word I could say there.
You could have just said fan again. Huh? You had the word on the tip of your tongue.
I had to slide a little derision in there, you know.
What was it called in the UK?
What was it called in the UK? It was not Planet of the Apes.
Kai.
Le Planète des Singes.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, send your answers in. If you got guesses, don't cheat and look it up because it's like the first sentence on the Wikipedia. But
Primate World.
you're pretty fucking close. I'm just gonna say that.
Okay.
But yeah,
Ape World.
Apeland.
you're hovering right around
That's
it.
crazy. Okay, cool.
We're orbiting around.
You're
the Planet of
orbiting
the Apes.
around the Planet of the Apes. Yeah, I will reveal that next week. But let's get into some horror Trivial Pursuit, horror edition Trivial Pursuit.
Right on. How this is going to work is we are going to read a category and then read the question to each other, with me to John, John to Anthony, and Anthony back to me, until we get through all 6 categories and crown a winner. And you're streaking to some degree, right?
He's peeking. He's drinking.
Yeah. And our first category is
Monster.
John in Reanimator from 85. Reanimation.
Reanimator. I hardly know her.
They should do Reanimator.
It's Mater from
Yes.
from Cars, but as a zombie. Yeah.
Anyway, reanimation is made possible by which of the following? Injection, electricity, magic, or artificial intelligence?
It's magic.
It's injection.
That is correct on the board.
Sheesh, man.
Slap hands.
Slap hands. In Fright Night from 1985, what kind of supernatural character is Jerry Dandridge?
Wow.
He's a vampire.
He's indeed a vampire.
Got a little fruit bat in him. He's a
On the
little fruity.
board.
Puts me on the board. Tone, for your bats question. What color hair do all of the mysterious children have in Village Idiots of the Damned from 1960?
It's in black and white.
So, do they have black hair or white hair?
I think it's supposed to be platinum blonde.
It is indeed blonde. There you go.
I synced it.
I synced it.
Great, we're all on the board. Can I get a high five? Fuck.
Slap
Or do I
hands,
have to
slap
do
hands,
my-
slap hands.
Woo! Okay, good. End of round 1, all tied up, and we're moving into
Gore / disturbing.
John in The Loved Ones from 2009. What 2 letters encircled by a heart does Lola Stone carve into the chest of protagonist Brent Mitchell?
I'm just going to say L and B.
Oh, it's her initials. It's L and S. That's a hell of a good guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tough break, tough break.
L and S. Those letters are also in the word loser.
I'm not reading your questions anymore. Anthony, in the final scene of The Cabin in the Woods from 2012, what appendage of one of the evil gods emerges from the floor of the temple?
Is Pete.
It's his Hey, I think I would have liked the movie a little bit more than. It's his big fucking hand.
Mm-hmm, it is indeed a hand.
Does it say that on the card? His big fucking hand.
Exactly.
Got one of them big fucking god hands. Tone. So weird. What a coincidence. In The Loved Ones from 2009. Who does Lola Stone inject with a household cleaner filled syringe? You want to go ahead and read your card and tell me?
I'm going to go ahead and guess. Brent Mitchell.
Oh, man. How did you guess that?
I hate you.
That's not my fault. Right on. Cool. So at the end of round 2, Anthony and I are tied. And John's sitting at 1.
John's human.
We're moving into
Psychological.
John.
Brain worms.
John, which character in Cube from 97
Kube.
helps design the cube-shaped prison? Is it Quentin McNeil, David Worth, Dr. Helen Holloway, or Joan Levin?
Or Cuba Gooding Jr.
I'm going to go with B.
David Worth?
Yes.
That is correct.
Nice. Good guess. I mean, thing you totally knew.
No, 100%. I definitely have not only seen Cube once, and it wasn't a long time ago.
You just did the old Scantron tactic of like, well, if I just do them all the same letter, there's a 40% chance I'll pass this test.
That last name is too funny.
Which one? Levin?
Yeah.
Joan Levin?
Well, sure as shit ain't staying.
Yeah, her middle name's Ivy.
Anthony, in what is protagonist Paul Conroy trapped for the entire duration of Buried from 2010?
I feel like this game has a lot of these questions about this movie, but nobody talks about this movie.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it in a few years, but I've seen it several times, and I really like that movie.
Yeah, me too.
It's very creepy. He's in a coffin. He's in a box.
He's in a sarcophagus.
He's one of those fucking sarcophagus.
It is indeed a coffin.
Cool. Tone. Crazy, these parallels. What mathematical quality accurately identifies room numbers with traps in Cube from 1997?
Kube.
Wait. Oh, it's okay.
This is so unfair. We didn't sign up for math.
Read it again. What mathematical
What
property?
mathematical quality accurately identifies room numbers with traps in Cube from 1997?
I have a guess if you don't get it.
Like factors of 3? Or I guess 4, huh? That'd be cute. I don't know. 6? I don't know. 3. Factors of 6.
Neither is correct. Do you have a guess, John?
Is it prime numbers?
It is powers of prime numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were close, but no cigar.
I was like pi, and I was like, no, every 3.14 cube. Like, I don't know what that means, dude. Right on. So, Anthony, you're sitting at 3,
We both got 2.
and we both got 2. Yeah, and we're moving into
Paranormal.
John. What is the name of the coastal town celebrating its centennial in the fog from 1980?
Spoiler alert, it's not Fogtown.
But what about those founders, though?
No spoilers.
Shit. Oh. Whoa.
South Fogsville. New Fog City.
That's what they'd call it if it was in the Mario franchise.
New Fogs. New Fogland.
Shit. Frogtown.
Is that your guess?
Yeah.
It is Antonio Bay.
Yeah, I wouldn't remember that. I'm on record as not having liked that movie very much.
Yeah, but it's got what's his name? Tom Atkins.
I watched Creepshow the other night, and oh my god, 1, fucking fantastic anthology. 2, it's got Tom Atkins as the dad in the beginning, and one of my all-time favorite movie lines is just like, he's like, "That's why God made fathers, babe, and that's why God made fathers." After he like scolds his kid and threatens to beat the shit out of him, he's like, "That's why God made fathers, babe."
Anthony, in Drag Me to Hell from 2009, what kind of debt does protagonist Christine Brown deny Mrs. Ganoush an extension?
That's a weird question.
It's weirdly worded.
No hints.
It's like some sort of home loan, right? It's like a home loan. Home Alone 2, Lost in New York.
What's the more flowery bank word for that?
A mortgage?
Indeed, it is a mortgage payment.
Home loan.
I went to the stock market. I did a business. Tone, the town in which The Fog takes place, has how many founders?
How many Fogtown founders?
Is that really the question?
Yeah, how many Fogtown founders would found a Fogtown?
How many
If
Fogtown founders?
Fogtown founders could found Fogtowns.
God, I don't want to be in this room anymore. Antonio Bay. 5.
Oh, so close. 6 Fogtown
God,
founders.
always one off.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it be 5 Fogtown founders?
Because
Come on, alliteration.
because unfortunately John Carpenter's not as clever as we are.
It's gotta be it. Well, fuck. All right. So what do we got? 2 each still, or what? Damn. And I think that 4.
Yep.
And we're moving into
Killer.
John Maniac from 1980 is set in what East Coast American city?
New Fog City.
Don't overthink it, buddy.
Gonna go with New York City?
That is correct. Give me a pound, my brother.
I'm going to pretend like I totally helped you there by saying New Fog City.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't paying close enough attention. Anthony, Night of the Hunter from 1955 was based on the novel of the same name by what author?
Oh, book time, bro.
Yeah, it's so unfair. Because I never learned to read. No, I've just been making this shit up as we've gone along.
He's pretty.
That's why they're all based.
That's why they're all based on your questions. Yeah.
Checks out.
Yeah.
Raymond Chandler.
Negative. It is. Do you have a guess? Bookman.
Oh, I have no idea. No,
It's Davis Grubb with 2 B's.
I honestly didn't know that was a book.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Today.
Learn something new every day and then immediately forget it. Tone.
Yeah, Grubb.
Yeah, Davis Grubb.
Davis Grubb.
Davis Grubb. Good movie, though. What actor that played one of the victims in Maniac from 1980,
What the fuck is happening?
I'm just making it up as I go along, was also the special effects artist on Dawn of the Dead from 1978?
Tom Savini.
It was indeed Tom Savini.
Oh, he's in Maniac?
Yeah.
He's the Maniac?
No, he's not the maniac.
He's a victim.
He's one of the victims.
He's a victim of the maniac.
I should listen. Yeah, you can't read, I can't hear. Right on. Cool. I got one.
You did get one.
All right.
I won. I won.
I wipe my own ass.
So we
Cool.
got 3. He's got.
Oh, you
4.
got one too?
Yeah.
Oh, man, means nothing. If I'm on ahead. All right, what are we moving into?
International.
Great. In Deep Red, John, from 1975.
Little Sargento cheese.
During what holiday does the murder in the drawing room of the screaming child take place?
Grimace?
It is Grimace!
Yeah, Grimace!
Damn, dude. You did a
Meg
lot better
Chrysler.
on that card than I thought you were going to. What did you end up getting?
4?
4?
4, 4, 4. 4, 4.
4.
For what?
For legal help.
Makes sense.
All right. To make it so that this doesn't end in a tie of some variety.
No, he's already got 4. He's already got 5.
No,
No,
he
I
does
missed
not
the
have
last
5. He
one.
did not get the last one.
The book one.
You have 4?
He has 4.
And you have 4?
Yes.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and I don't like it.
Well, it's not going to stay that way for very long. Who directed The Devil's Backbone from 2001?
Son of a bitch.
Well,
You got an easy card today, brother. Except that one question.
Davis Grubb ass motherfucker.
if I know my anatomy, that was Guillermo del Toro,
Indeed, Guillermo del Toro.
future Frankenstein director.
Maybe. Allegedly.
Allegedly. Give him his deep red question.
Close enough. Tone, who directed Suspiria? From 1977, to clarify.
Dario Sargento.
It was indeed our favorite brand of cheese.
The cheese man himself. That was one that I
That's
almost
fucking
included on today's list because I didn't know if either of you had seen Deep Red.
Yesterday?
Last week for the spin for the alphabet because we did D this week.
Did we not cover Deep Red at some point during...
No, we did not.
Giallo? Oh, well, then I've just seen it individually. But, yeah.
I think instead of doing Deep Red, I think we covered Philomena instead.
That doesn't sound familiar to me at all. Anyway.
You mean Phenomena with Jennifer Connelly?
That we did.
Yeah, Philomena is a different thing.
You won. Congratulations.
Oh, I did. Oh.
Good job.
Yeah, you did win.
Sweet.
You done did winded.
So that's...
But better game than I thought it was going to be. You really showed up, John. Good job. And thank you, me. And that's going to be it for trivia. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to talk about Mad Max Fury Road.
One last time, witness me.
I thought we were going to do
Just
one
kidding,
more.
it's not the last time. We're not at the end of the road yet, buddy.
Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/Porcelain Peak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more. Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/Porcelain Peak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more.
Hey, you want to see something really scary?
Welcome back. We're going to get started with our main discussion and finishing up March Madness.
Vroom, vroom.
And talking about...
Witness me.
Yeah.
All right, a little seductive. No, irritated and turned on. Finishing off these Mad Max movies, talking about Mad Max Fury Road, the last entry in the franchise for now.
I was going to say to date.
From the ancient year of 2015.
Yes, so again, this one was directed by George Miller. He wrote this in partnership with, let me bring close to the mic, Brendan McCarthy and Nico Lathouris. So from what I heard is that McCarthy and him met when Miller wanted to do the TV show that we were talking about last week in between 3 and 4 here. And McCarthy was like, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that we should go movie. And he had some ideas. And he was a comic book artist. And some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I saw today was that they storyboarded so much of this movie. They had like 3,000.
Yeah, I think it was like 3,500
Or something,
storyboard
yeah.
drawings.
It was
yeah,
it's like a room. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, they mapped out the entire thing. The amount of thought and time that went into like just concepting this movie is pretty crazy, especially considering how close together, relatively close together the 3 previous ones were. I guess he had this idea floating around in his head for a while. He wanted to make it in like the late 90s, a lot closer to Thunderdome, with, like we had discussed before, with Gibson coming back and playing an older Max.
Yeah, so this time around we do have Tom Hardy, if you're not familiar with the stars of this one, Charlize Theron, Nicholas Hoult, and anyone else? Zoe Kravitz.
Well, it was actually interesting watching it this time because like almost all of the brides I now have seen in other things. But
really?
yeah, like Riley Keough is one of the brides, and she is, I didn't know this until very recently, Elvis's granddaughter. The red-haired one.
Oh, in
this
real
movie.
life.
In real life, she's Elvis's granddaughter, yeah. And also was in It Comes at Night, and she's the wife with the kid that comes into the house, and they all get paranoid and all that shit. The son kind of has a crush on. Anyway, she's been in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Zoe Kravitz, obviously.
For being Zoe Kravitz.
Yeah, and other things. But
So you wanted to make it late 90s with Mel Gibson.
yeah, wanted to make it, and then a little, just small thing you might have heard of called 9/11 happened, and also the economy collapsed pretty much, and the Australian dollar was like worthless.
The dollar-y-do.
Compared to the American dollar.
Insensitive, dude.
They knew there was going to be a lot of travel involved to make this movie, and travel was obviously very restricted after 9/11. So all of this kind of put it to a halt. And because Miller had already rented out the like studio space to do Happy Feet, and was kind of doing, it was like, oh, I'll go make Mad Max and then I'll do Happy Feet. He was like, well, now I can't travel, but I could make Happy Feet, on on a computer and in the studio with motion capture. So that's why he ended up doing that first. And then eventually worked his way back into coming back to this idea in between the 90s when he wanted to make it. And then when it eventually came out, he considered doing it as an anime-inspired TV show. Then at one point he was working with the guys who did God of War to make it like a God of War style Mad Max video game based on the story of Fury Road. And then eventually he was just like, fuck it, we're going to make it as a movie. And
boy, did he. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the whole time I was watching it, I was like, okay, this should be Mel Gibson, like deep into his 50s. And for me, I like to think of it as the fourth entry in the franchise. So you might be asking yourself, like, what is this? Is it a remake? Is it a reboot? Is it a sequel? And really the answer is yes to all of those things and no to all of those things all at the same time. And from what I've heard is that Miller intentionally is very vague about what this movie is so that it's kind of what you want it to be.
yeah, I kind of like when I first went in, I wanted to in my head pretend like, okay, this is still Mel Gibson, but I actually found that to be more annoying than anything else while I was watching it, because I do think that Tom Hardy's Max is a very, very different character.
Water.
Yeah, and I also like I had read that comic that I explained to you guys that bridges the two together, and I was like, okay, so I'm definitely going to feel like this is a continuation, but really at the end of the day, it felt more like if you took all the elements of Mad Max and threw them into a blender and was like, now make a new Mad Max like nobody's ever seen a Mad Max movie before. And that kind of seems to be what George's intention was. We've talked about him enough now. I'm just going to call him George. Like we know each
Georgie.
other, but, or I'll call him Mate, you know, speaking his native tongue. But yeah, so he even said like, he kind of wanted to make this a reinvention of the Mad Max world, like have some references to the other movies, but not have it be tied into continuity and all that. And like we said, the continuity was already loose between those previous three movies, but I really in my head was like, okay, I'm going to imagine this as being like a different Max. Like what if we just reinvented Max and made him a slightly different, more aggressive, insane character? Like I remember when I walked out of Fury Road, in my head I was like, oh, this one actually really played into the mad part as not being like angry Max, but like insane Max. Like
Yeah.
mad, like he is gone.
He's pushed past the breaking point in more ways than one.
Yeah, and so that's how we open up the movie. Is we open up with the first narration by Max. Previously in the movies, it's always been a different character, or in the first one, no narration. But we have Max doing his whole, my name is Max, my world is fire and blood. And that's my very terrible Tom Hardy impression.
I remember walking out of this movie and being like, oh, there wasn't like a lot of Max in this. And then earlier when we were doing this, you were like, yeah, Max, is that me? Vibrate?
Yeah, 100% it's you.
Sorry about that.
Um,
I remember you saying like, he's not really the star of these movies. And then when we rewatched him, I was like, well, I don't really feel that way. He really is the forefront of all three. And then in this one, I was like, oh no, he really is in this movie the whole time. Like it is still a Mad Max movie.
He doesn't have a lot of dialogue, but that's because he's in a muzzle half the time.
He doesn't, but like you were saying, it's a different kind of Max. And I was like, okay, so I think having time and like distance from that, I felt a lot differently about it because he's in the whole thing. He's actually not really not in this movie.
And he actually has more lines than Max has had in some of the previous movies. Like he does talk a bit more, even if it is a lot of just short, grunts and things like, you said like water and
Yeah, but it's not his movie. It's their movie. Like it's him and Furiosa's movie and Nicholas Holt's character's movie. Like they're really the main three.
Well, and it's always
big
seemed like
stars.
Miller. I guess what I was trying to get out with the earlier movies is that it's always seemed like Miller is less interested in Max as a character and more interested in how can Max bring us to the new piece of world building that I want to introduce in this movie, and like how can I have Max be the vessel in which to explore how the Wasteland has evolved, and this is where it feels like he really like honed in on that and kind of, I think, for the better, realized that the Furiosa story was more the heart of this movie and the more interesting aspect of the movie, and so allowed Charlize and the Furiosa character to be the center of the movie. But
she's
yeah,
great.
She's fucking fantastic, and I think that was something that Miller was also fighting with in his head too. Like when he was putting this together, he kind of played with, okay, does Furiosa take up too much of the movie to where it stops being a Mad Max movie? And a lot of people were saying, no, like, she is the heart of the movie. You need to invest more time into her character and allow her like more of a chance to evolve as a character in the movie. And also by this point between Thunderdome and making this movie, he became a pretty vocal feminist. And so I think he very intentionally wanted to introduce some really powerful feminist themes into this. He actually had, consultations with feminist writers to make sure that the way he was portraying this character's journey, wasn't a man trying to do a woman's story, but more like it felt authentic. And then obviously you have the bride characters who have been subjected, but
and like also like homogenized by Immortan Joe, forced to all wear white and to all kind of like do his bidding and be there just to bear his children. And as the story goes on, they all kind of get more leeway to behave as their own characters, so they all have their own individual arcs that we follow, which I think is really cool.
And we had joked between like the premise of Road Warrior, like why we thought Fury Road had a more interesting premise, and we were saying it's because it's not about gas, it's about people. And that's the line that really like popped into Miller's head when I think he was like at an airport in LA flying back to Australia, and that was the idea that popped into his head was, what if we're in the wasteland, but instead of fighting for gas or land or whatever it is, or water, they're fighting over people.
Yeah,
like over human beings. And that's what like really unlocked the idea for him.
Speaking of water, I realized this time, I don't think I ever noticed this line when he's giving his big speech. He's like, don't get addicted to water. And I was like, oh, it's so weird that it's addicting, like to think of it in that regard.
Well, I've heard like shower thoughts type like Reddit things about people saying like, what if like we are just addicted to water, and like it's an addiction that we've never, we've all been addicted to it, and like we could kick it or whatever. I was like, what if we're just addicted to sleep, and that's why we sleep all the time, and like we don't really need it as much as we think, and all these like crackpot things. But in this, he's honestly trying to convince these people who probably don't really know any better, like, hey, don't get addicted to this water because it'll take control of your life.
Also, I was like, that has got to be the worst way to distribute that water.
Yeah,
like,
100%.
Hands down, the most wasteful thing you can do.
So wasteful. Like, I was trying to rationalize it in my head. I was like, oh, well, maybe there's some like seeds planted down there and it helps to irrigate like future plant. And I was like, whatever. No. It just looks cool for him to hit the levers and let the water pour down. But yeah, so we open the movie with Max, and he pretty much fucking immediately gets plowed through and has his car wrecked.
I believe that the guy that was driving the car that flips has like it might be the most like flips a car has actually done in a movie, but I'm pretty sure that's the guy that shattered his shins.
Oh, really?
Like he wanted to come back and do it. I think that's what the special feature said, so I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's because they kept showing him flipping. Like, this guy.
It wouldn't surprise me because he does bring a lot of the like people he's worked with before, which makes sense because they've done fucking crazy stunts for him before. But
this takes the cake on crazy fucking stunts.
But yeah, we learned pretty quickly that this Max is one that is very much haunted by the failures of his past. There's a lot more of like him seeing shit in the movie than I remembered. Like, I had forgotten about that whole thing of him like constantly having the flashes of.
There's even like a flash of volcano, like lava. I was like, what the fuck?
There's a flash at one point that's of the bulging eyes that Toe Cutter has in the first one. They like they put that clip in real quick, and I was like, ooh, nice little Easter egg if you remember the first movie. But yeah, he's seeing like, I was really confused the first time I saw this because I had just watched the previous 3 Mad Max movies and hadn't read that in between comic that I talked about. And so for this, I was like, oh, okay, so does he have a daughter now in this new reinvented timeline? And that was his daughter that got killed, but it's supposed to be the girl that I told you guys that he rescued in the comic, and then that she got plowed down by those like buzzard guys with the spiky cars.
I don't think she ever says dad, does she?
At one point she says like Papa, but I think it's like in his brain, like it's confusing things or whatever. But yeah, I guess the idea is that at this point, part of the reason why this Max is so much more like just fuck you, like I'm not going to help anybody, is because he is just constantly now plagued by all of the people that he's tried to help and failed to help.
And it even comes up in some of his dialogue as well, like that basically that when he shows up, he makes things worse.
Yeah, and I do think that if you wanted to put this in the continuity of the other movies, like it makes sense that he would potentially get to this point of being like, you know,
The only thing that doesn't make sense is his age.
yeah, and I think I was just a little bit surprised by how just ruthless Tom Hardy's Max is in comparison. Like, I know that Mel Gibson's Max is very like self-serving, like, I'm just going to help you out because I need the gasoline, but he always seems like, and maybe it's just because it's Mel Gibson and his portrayal of that character, he always seems like he's got a little bit of that humanity. Like, it doesn't take too much to convince him, like, oh, I should kind of help you out. This Max, like, it takes a long time for him because he just straight up tries to steal the war rig at that one point. He's like, I'm going to take off with it. And it's just because of the, you know, fail-safe thing, that the kill switch that she has on it. He's constantly just pointing guns at anybody. Like, he's going to straight up shoot the brides at one point. He tries. He doesn't give a fuck about them. And he's just completely done with the idea of helping people out.
This movie pushes the PG-13 rating, I think, pretty fucking far. And
isn't this one rated R?
Oh, is it rated R? I thought it was 13.
I'm not
pretty sure this one is rated R because I think I read in the trivia that there were 2 cuts. There was a PG-13 cut and a rated R cut, and the studio loved the movie so much that they allowed him to put out the rated R version.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think there was too much. There would have been too much violence in this movie for it to have worked.
But you don't see a lot of blood and guts.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is that
Except for
I think
Immortan
the
Joe.
way that the violence is handled in this is slightly different than some of the stuff we've seen in the previous movies, and it kind of lends into the fairy tale thing a little bit. But the violence he chooses to focus on is more like the crazy destruction of the cars and people flying out of cars and all that shit. And he doesn't choose to focus on the obvious implied physical and sexual violence against the brides. Like, we know what happened there, but we don't have to see it explicitly. Like, we know without having to see it, and we don't get as much of, because we've seen people being sexually assaulted in the previous movies, and in this one it's more implied. He doesn't want to torture us with having to see that, and then the violence in general feels a lot less kind of
the scene that
like
immediately
gritty and real.
The scene that immediately jumps into head is in previous movies, if he goes to like get into a fight with somebody in like a camp or whatever, like, you see Mel Gibson do that. You see him get into the fight at the Thunderdome, and how crazy that gets. But if you look at like when he has to go back, when they go to like the swamp place and they pull the truck off to the side and he has to go get them stuff to make it work. He goes back by himself and he just comes back covered in blood. But we don't see what happens. We just see him come back with all the shit, and they're like, "Oh, are you okay?" And Furious is like, "That's not his blood."
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I think that part of what works so well about this, and also doesn't make it feel like, because we run into that thing all the time, and I had this kind of, you know, dilemma with something like The Last of Us, where obviously huge portions of The Last of Us are going to remind me of 100 other zombie things that have come out in the last 10, 15 years. And, or like, specifically, I was like, a lot of it reminds me of A Quiet Place. But The Last of Us game came out before A Quiet Place. And so it's like, you know, this whole thing, or like Stranger Things, where it's like now when they make a Stephen King adaptation, it feels like it's ripping off the style of Stranger Things, even though Stranger Things is ripping off Stephen King, right? Yeah. So with this, I was like, okay, he easily could have made this movie and had it feel like every other like post-apocalyptic desert kind of apocalypse movie that had come out since Thunderdome and had been ripping off Mad Max. And instead, because he does choose to make it super fucking colorful, that was a big thing for him, is he's like, I don't want it to look desaturated and gross like most of like The Road or something.
When they drive into the storm, holy shit, is that beautiful.
And also it blew me away that happens in the first 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
They're in that giant fucking storm and the score is just going crazy and it's just absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, he was like, I want everything to be as colorful as we can make it, you know, and so that it doesn't look drab. And I think the way he handled the violence was probably him trying to kind of distance from the more like really gritty, fucked up violence that you saw in some of this other like post-apocalyptic type shit and make this more of like a... Because really, the important part of this is the chase, and that's the thing that he wanted to focus on this. And like I said, I think this is what he's been trying to do for many of these movies now. Is he wanted to just make a movie that was one long chase, and the vehicles and the chase and the characters are the important part.
Yeah.
And not necessarily like the brutal violence. It's still brutal and gritty, but
I want to talk about the chase and how that sequence plays out, but I think that as far as the violence goes, we mentioned it, I think talking about either 1 or 2, how there's like a car wreck and they're like, we didn't damage the car, and not worried about the people, and the car is really the focus. I think it's in 1.
Yeah.
And we talked about that, and I feel like that idea is taken here and up to like 100, right? Because all of the violence and stuff is focused around cars. Like, they worship cars. We see that with the steering wheel cut out in the mountain, with the brands,
with the
sign of
crossing
the
the
VA.
fingers, yeah.
We see that with them
the chrome,
or them, and them having the people who like jump out to like blow fuel directly into the headers on the engine.
So fucking cool.
Like, it's all like the violence isn't centered around the people. The violence is centered around the vehicles for the most part.
Yeah.
And so I think shifting that focus helps out too.
Well, and this is the pinnacle of the vehicles as characters. Like, each of these groups has their own like distinct styles of vehicles, and all of the vehicles do say something about the character. Like, a Morton Joe's vehicle is like a bunch of stacked like coupes or something, like it's a bunch of like fancy vehicles that are stacked to show like his dominance. And then you have the war rig is like so like a bunch of different military and like hauling stuff fused together. And then you have
also a part of a Volkswagen Bug.
Yeah, on the front. Yeah, and then you have the buzzards who have like all the crazy spikes coming out of their little like dune buggy things, and they also drive the motorcycles, and they can leap off of all the hills and stuff, and they know the terrain, and so they can like zoom all over the place. So like everything, and then obviously you have like the doof wagon, as it's called, with he's called the Doof Warrior. Yeah, the guy that plays the guitar, that was a real like 130-pound guitar that they built. It was like a guitar bass hybrid. Wow. And it actually shot those, like, that's a real thing that's happening. It had like a thing where with the whammy bar he could make it shoot flames.
Yeah,
that's fucking so cool.
This is an example that we talk about all the time, where they did as much as they could practically and then used the CGI to enhance and to not create the movie. Like, a lot of this is done on screen. Most of it is done on screen.
Yeah, Miller said 90% of the movie is done practically.
Yeah.
Like,
and it shows, and it's going to hold up forever.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to look as good in 10 years as it did. Well, fuck, it's almost been 10 years.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, and it still looks incredible. And really, the CG does what we've always harped on CG being best at, which is, going in and just enhancing things and doing things that just wouldn't be practical. But not necessarily
like driving through tornadoes.
Yeah, like that's obviously heavily CG, but most of the computer effects went into sky replacement, just so that he always had the perfect sky for the situation he needed. Just swapping out, obviously expanding crowds at the Citadel and this whole Citadel itself. They needed CG to do that. But outside of that, like all of the explosions, the car crashes, like, there are obviously some CG double people that are flipping out of some of the vehicles and some of the more extreme stuff. But like the giant rig that crashes at the end and blocks off the canyon, they got like one of the world's basically best stunt drivers to do the stunt. And Miller was convinced that the guy had died because they had a Nux dummy like in the vehicle, and he saw it like on the monitor like roll under the vehicle, and he thought that it was the stunt performer, and he was I just fucking killed the dude in this stunt. But it turned out no, they just did it once, fucking nailed it, and didn't have to do it again. But they had like a jack or like a
flipper type,
like a pneumatic
thing,
flipper
right?
thing, that hit the thing from underneath and flipped it, and there's a dude inside driving it and doing that stunt and crashing that giant fucking thing. And I think they had a couple hundred cars, and I think maybe 80 of them survived the movie because they just blew so many of them up and destroyed them and ripped them apart.
Yeah, I feel like Miller didn't take it, like, he took it seriously. He made a great movie, but he also has some fun with it, because there's stuff where, like, shit's flying at the screen. It's a little bit cheesy, but it kind of makes you smile. The steering wheel that, like, flies. Yeah, you're like, okay, so it's like he's having fun, and then it makes you have fun. So I really like that. Some other carryovers that we see from other parts of the franchise is that kind of, like, fast motion thing that he does. I don't really know what it's called or how to explain it.
I have I have a whole theory that like cracked open in my brain space about this.
About that, yeah, because he does it even all the way back in the first one.
So yeah, I had talked about that with the previous ones. I think he does it definitely the most in this movie, and from what I read, so he had his wife actually edit the movie because. And she had never edited an action movie before.
Shit.
And
fucking nailed it.
And when she asked him why he felt she was the right person for it, he said it's because if he had a man edit it, they would edit it like every other generic action, male-centric action movie. So he wanted her to do something different. But the film has 2,700 cuts in its 120-minute runtime, which is 22.5 cuts per minute compared to Mad Max 2's 1,200 cuts in 90 minutes, which is 13.33. So it's cutting like crazy. But on top of that, almost every scene has some sort of manipulation of the frame rate, of the speed that it's going. Sometimes he's speeding it up, sometimes he's slowing it down slightly. And that was just so that if he felt like the action that a character was doing was easily, you were able to read what they were doing and understand what they were doing at an increased speed, he would increase the speed just to keep things moving along. And then if he felt like, oh, that went by a little bit too quick, he'd crank it down a little bit. And so the whole movie is moving at just like weird off-kilter frame rates. But it's always reminded me of silent films. And
it goes back to what we talked about of him wanting to make a movie that you can understand without subtitles.
Yeah, and I really think that it has always been his dream to make a Buster Keaton movie. And I, completely unrelated to this, I was knocking movies off of my AFI Top 100, and I watched The General, which is from 1926. It's Buster Keaton, and the premise of this movie is, I'm sure you guys have seen clips from it before. Buster Keaton is a train conductor during the Civil War. Some dudes from the South come and steal his train, so then he has to go on like another train and chase after them, and the whole movie is a chase on railroads. And Keaton, the thing that makes it so impressive is he's constantly running around on this moving train and jumping in front of it and doing stunts and throwing shit out of the way. And as I was watching that, it was reminding me of how in Fury Road, it's constantly Max and people jumping from vehicle to vehicle and running along the tops. And they use the vehicles like set pieces, and not just
Moving
a way to get from
pieces.
one place. Yeah. So I was seeing all of these parallels. I was like, this is basically like 100 years later remake of The General with Buster Keaton, just with way more explosions and crazy stuff. I thought, okay, I've come up with this crazy genius theory that nobody's ever thought of. Went on Letterboxd. The literal first review for The General is Mad Max Fury Railroad. So, then I Googled it, and there have been a couple different articles written about the comparisons between this movie and Fury Road. And then on top of that, he comes out with a black and white edition. So
did you guys watch that?
I own it. I don't think I've ever
that
seen
would
it.
take away from the movie.
The color
It's
is
gorgeous.
so gorgeous in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, he also came out with a version that is just the score. Like all the dialogue is removed, and it's just basically a silent film in black and white.
Wow.
So it's like he really wanted to try to remake a Buster Keaton movie, basically.
I do think that there's not a lot that the dialogue has to do. There's not a lot of heavy lifting that's required when it's just constant action.
I think that if you watch this movie as just an action movie, it totally works in that regard. But if you want more from it, the dialogue does help develop these characters
Yes.
to a point where you actually give a shit about some of these characters, and it makes it more than just like a Rock'em Sock'em action movie.
Yeah, I mean,
it
like
has
the-
depth to it.
Like when they lose one of the brides.
When she
When
goes
she goes under the wheel.
God, dude.
that whole scene is just, it's very well acted with such little dialogue.
Well, and you can tell like that at that point, obviously Max, like it's affected him, but he is obviously like,
Compartmentalizing
He's
it.
compartmentalizing because he's been through this so many times, and so he's just like, she went under the wheel, saw it, she went under the wheel, and he like won't really acknowledge it, and everybody else is kind of freaking out around him, and he's just like, no, we just gotta stay focused and like gotta get to where we're going. But like it's the performances are just amazing, and
they do enough that it works and with a little bit.
Yeah, but
And
the scene when they get to the mothers, and Furiosa is like, well, where is everybody?
Yeah.
Why is nobody at home? And
Like you already passed it.
yeah, and then that scene where she walks in and she steps kind of into the sandstorm and just drops to her knees. Like it looks stunning, but the performance and just how subtle things are, and then she just kind of lets out like a feral scream. It's just a fantastic scene, like A+. Like,
well, and even there's an example of it still takes the time to briefly like cut to Max, and he's watching her, and you can see that like he obviously feels for her, like and feel, and so it does cut to him, enough for us to see that he's still there, he's still involved,
right? And I mentioned it to you guys outside of the show, but the intention was for Max and Furiosa to end up together, and that was how it was written. And then Miller changed it at the end, and I guess the writer saw the movie for the first time and was like, "Wait, what the fuck just happened? Why did you do that?" And I guess he was a little bit angry, but I think it
works
like
better.
This.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not as cheesy for them to fall in love. But if they would have, I would have been okay with it, because their relationship, you see it develop, it works.
Yeah, they have chemistry.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, yeah, and then there are obviously parallels in their characters. For whatever reason, it had never registered with me that Furiosa is just another word for mad. It's just Spanish
Furious.
for mad. Yeah, for furious, for mad. And so I was like, oh, they even got like a little name thing going on. That's cute. And I guess there was a version also where at the end it was going to be basically the same, but Max was going to go up on the platform with them, like to go up into the Citadel. And Hardy was the one who actually was like, I feel like that would be very out of character for Max to do, because his argument was, even though Max has been through all of this, he would still be so disillusioned by like this whole wasteland that his thought process would be, are they really going to do anything better now that they're in control? Like, I'm not going to stick around and see them fuck it up too.
I gave them a good shot. Now I'm going to go on to the next thing.
Almost what you were talking about on the bonus episode with Dark City.
Yeah.
Where it's like, are you going to be able to, now that you're in control, do any better?
Yeah, it's like you're supposed to be the heroes, but it's still like the wasteland turns people.
Yeah, I mean, this movie really thrives on its pacing. It's fucking nonstop. You get so much action. Even the downtime there's something going on. Like,
you can always see like the pack behind them.
Always,
no matter how far they get away, you can still see them being followed by Immortan Joe and his group.
And even when it's not the car chases, like when they're on foot, like they're still moving. Like, this movie just doesn't stop. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Like, if you think about like the majority of like the career of someone like Kevin Smith, where people have complained for years up until his more recent films that he always films on a tripod and that the camera never moves. And then like this movie has, I wouldn't call it a problem, but it goes in the opposite direction. The camera is always
constantly
moving.
Yeah,
it's wild.
I did want to briefly say I did think it was cool that we got to see like a slightly different kind of, I mean, we did in Thunderdome, but I really liked the like marshy air, like the crows area that they went to
with them on the stilts.
Yeah, and you have that weird, creepy, like unexplained stilt person. Yeah, and the way that they shot all of that, where like you can obviously tell it's day for night, where they obviously shot all the nighttime scenes in bright ass daylight, but the way that they did it is they shot it like way overexposed and on purpose, and then color corrected it to make it so that it's not convincing that it's not necessarily like real nighttime, but it matches the rest of the aesthetic of the movie and feels like this world's kind of version of nighttime.
Yeah,
because you can still tell what's going on, and to me that's very important in an age where half the time when it gets dark in a show you cannot tell, or a movie you have no
look at you
clue.
Outwaters.
Yeah, I mean that's
just black.
That's just black screen. But I had a couple other things that I thought were really interesting that stood out to me. I had mentioned to you guys that my brain was like melting watching this with my AirPods in with noise canceling because the sound design is so good and like intentionally over the top. Everything is just making like the most textured, gritty, metallic noise that it could possibly make. But there are details that I obviously wouldn't have picked up on subconsciously or consciously, but my brain picked up on them. The sound designer Mark Mangini stated that he viewed the war rig as an allegory for Moby Dick, with Immortan Joe playing Captain Ahab. Which totally makes sense.
Wow.
As such, the mechanical truck sounds of the rig were layered with whale calls to provide a more animal-like quality, and when the tank is pierced with harpoons and milk sprays out, sounds of whales breathing from their blowholes were incorporated. For the final destruction of the war rig, the only sounds used were slowed down bear growls to symbolize the death of the truck as a living creature. So it lends into that whole turning the vehicles into characters thing. Right. The flame shooting guitarist was Australian musician Sean Hape, better known as Iota. In an interview on Vice, he said that the guitar weighed 132 pounds and shot real gas-powered flames that he controlled with the whammy bar.
What did you guys think of Joe as a villain?
I think that he's interesting. I think that he's fairly understated. I feel like his presence is menacing. They did a really great job of designing him to look creepy. Like,
yeah, I love his like horse tooth mask, and it's similar to Bane, where like you don't really know why he wears that mask, but you know he needs it for from what I could tell from maybe the comics is that it's supposed to give him like clean air, which nobody else really gets to breathe because everything's all, you know, and he gets to breathe the clean air to try to like keep him from deteriorating.
Because we do see other people with like the oxygen.
Well, and he's obviously very he's sick somehow from, I assume, radiation.
Yeah.
And his problem is that his kids so far have been also deformed, and so he's hoping that if he has these well taken care of, well fed women that he can assault to have kids, then he'll finally have normal kids. I think what actually works better about making him a really compelling villain is the War Boys, is the cult around Immortan Joe. I think you feel his presence throughout the entire movie because you have Nux, which is kind of a new element to, like, we've had side characters, but we have kind of somebody who at the beginning we think is a villain and is kind of working for the villain, and he kind of makes a heel turn obviously and finds his humanity, I think, more than Max does, but he plays kind of that journey of, and you even see like it symbolically shows in the paint wearing off of his body as the movie progresses and he's becoming more of a human. But we're always being reminded of Immortan Joe, either through the War Boys or through, like you said, seeing his like war party out in the distance and them constantly saying like, oh, he's coming up. And Joe really doesn't have too much screen time, but
when he does, they take advantage of it. They do like the classic film techniques where they basically only show people by the eyes to like indicate like emotion, and very similar to things they've done in the past with silent film. I mean, the earliest iteration of that I can think of is obviously Bela Lugosi and Dracula.
Yeah.
And just kind of just showing the eyes to show evil intent. And they do that a lot with Immortan Joe while he's driving in his war party.
Yeah, and those are also the eyes that we saw bulge in the original. So maybe he was like, I hope you guys recognize those eyes because you've seen them in a previous one. But yeah, I think the entire culture, like I love the whole car worshipping culture of Immortan Joe's
Towers of
and how they've
Wheels.
merged like worshipping cars with like the terminology and concepts from like Norse mythology. They've taken like this like Viking mentality and this car bro mentality and fused them together in a really interesting way. So yeah, they have like the worshipping the V8 and witness me, I'll see you in Valhalla, and then the chroming thing. I guess that chroming is actual Australian slang for inhalant abuse.
Oh,
so that was something that.
So they're like basically getting high one last time before they
yeah, and so a lot of people
it.
thought that like, oh, it's just paint that they're spraying on or whatever, but the idea is supposed to be that it's supposed to be some sort of like stimulant drug that's keeping them hooked and keeping them like going on the warpath. And another way that Immortan Joe is keeping them on the hook. Also the whole like concept of the blood bags and like using people to get clean blood
weird.
and like it's just, it's nasty.
Yeah, we get they got the engine blueprints like I guess like burned on their chests, and then they all, I don't know if everybody has it, but like Tom Hardy has all his like health information. I guess that's like the blood bag thing. Yeah, so I tried to pause it and read some of it.
I have the whole thing here.
Okay.
I'm gonna read it here.
It's
in a
pretty
bit.
interesting.
Yeah. So
It's like no lumps, no bumps, no coconuts.
yeah. Apparently, Bong Joon-ho saw this, and it is a favorite of his, and he said that it moved him to tears. Also, Robert Rodriguez saw the movie and stood up, and I guess Miller was at the screening, stood up in the audience and basically pointed at the screen during one scene and was like, how the fuck did you film this? And that's coming from Robert Rodriguez, who obviously has filmed some crazy stuff in his career. Gibson, I guess, was at the premiere of the movie with Miller, and he said he basically like he was really nervous at first. Miller was about what his reaction was going to be, but he said like pretty quickly he just started like just chuckling, like having a total blast with the movie. And he had from the beginning.
I can only imagine being in a room with Mel Gibson chuckling would being one of the most terrifying experiences I'd ever had in my entire life.
When we first see Max, like with his hair and like the beard and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Mel Gibson looks now. So I was like, oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Scraggly and shit.
And then this movie won 6 Oscars, making it the most successful Australian film at the Academy Awards, and also the only Mad Max film to win Oscars or even be nominated, I think, and also strange for the 4th movie in a franchise to
I mean,
be that successful.
I brought this up to you guys, and so I looked into it a little bit. And according to Rolling Stone, this is the greatest action movie.
That's the list I looked at
of all
earlier, too,
time.
when you asked. Yeah.
And then I looked at other lists, and it wasn't even on it. And so I was like, well, I don't trust you if you don't have Fury Road on here.
Yeah.
Because this, I honestly think, is, if not the greatest action movie,
It's top 5 guaranteed.
Is at least in the conversation to me.
Yeah.
And you guys had mentioned The Matrix and something else I can't remember.
John Wick.
Oh, and John
Yeah.
Wick, yeah. And so that got me kind of thinking, like, yes, obviously John Wick is heavily influenced by The Matrix.
Also, Terminator 2.
Huh? Oh, on a lot of lists.
Well, I'm saying Terminator 2 is in that conversation.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But so you have, I think there was the stunt coordinator on The Matrix that's directing the John Wick movies.
Yeah.
Or something. He's involved somehow. And obviously you get Keanu and you get a lot of the Gung Fu stuff, and that's very similar. And you can see, like, how that evolved. I don't feel like this has ties to a lot of stuff like that's happening now.
There's not really an equivalent, because even something like the Fast and Furious movies, which I think would be the easiest to try to draw a parallel to, because it at least used to be a lot of car chases and car involved stuff. Even that is at this point using a lot of CG cars and cars going into space and all this crazy shit. And
it's cool that he didn't have modern influences, like maybe Buster Keaton, like back in the day, but that's so far removed from what people are watching now. And so it's cool to see the distance and him kind of like, I'm going to make my own thing. Like, this is the first of its kind in a lot of ways.
And I mean, and to continue down that line of logic, like, how, if you're someone who is inspired by this and wants to make something similar, how do you make something that improves on it in any way, shape, or form? I mean, like I said, if you want it to be brainless action and just watch candy on the screens go by for 2 hours, you can have that. You could turn your brain off and just enjoy the fact that it is the most beautiful spectacle that maybe have been put to film at any point in time ever.
Does that sentiment worry you about the sequels?
I mean, if he can give more of the same, I will still be happy. I'm not looking for him to outdo himself. Okay. I'm looking for him to give me more story.
And I would imagine Furiosa, especially being a prequel, and it is going to have some stuff that takes place in the Green Place, and and show her like leaving the Green Place, and that 19 years, between going from Anya Taylor-Joy to being Charlize Theron.
It'll
be a different movie.
What's your or?
The or is, you can also get a very subtly told, very enticing and well put together post-apocalyptic science fiction film to go with all of that action. Right. And you get them both at the same time. So if you want headier concepts, you just got to unlock your brain to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you improve it. I think you just try to make something that's equally enjoyable to watch. Like,
you make complementary.
Like John Wick doesn't improve The Matrix. It's different, influenced by, definitely, but very much its own thing. And yeah, complementary and in a different way, and still makes decent movies. Like, they're good. They're great movies.
But yeah, how do you step into that realm with a titan like George Miller and say, I'm gonna out George Miller? The answer is you just don't. And that's the reason why in the last 7-8 years since Fury Road came out, there hasn't been anything that's been close to like it.
Well, and I think the thing that really separates movies like The Matrix or John Wick or Fury Road is that the people making those movies, they understand, they intimately understand that action isn't necessarily just doing the biggest explosions and doing the biggest car crashes.
Isn't just cutting to Liam Neeson 8 times.
Well, because like with Miller, there's so much thought put into every single aspect of it, when a lot of people, I think, who would think about action movies would think they're the exact opposite of having to put thought into them. It's like, just make it flashy and cool and loud and crazy. And I think a lot of action movies, and a lot of it is just like, does it look cool? In this, the cinematographer, Miller was like telling the cinematographer, I don't care how you've shot. Well, not I don't care how you've shot previous movies, but I know you've shot previous movies in a certain way. What I need you to do on this movie is make sure that Furiosa or Max, whoever is the center of the action in this, is always in the center of the frame, no matter what's going on.
Oh, really?
And if you watch it, your brain will get stuck on that, and you'll notice that whoever is the focal point of the scene is always dead center in the frame to help the audience understand what the fuck is going on, because everything else is so crazy that he's like, as long as we keep the focal point in the center of the frame, and that's a man who understands how to make action, or like, I want to make sure that we crash this truck for real, because if we do it CG, I know it's not going to be up to the right snuff and everything, and to be able to do all that and also do it safely.
Yeah.
That was a big thing too with
We're looking at you, John Landis.
both Hardy and Theron. They didn't really know if this movie was going to work, like, while they were filming it, because he had so many, like, his idea, like, he knew it in his head what he wanted it to be, but he couldn't translate it properly really to the actors. I guess Hardy was really difficult to work with on set, and when they premiered the movie, I think at Sundance or one of those film festivals, he did like a big apology speech before the movie, because he had seen it now and was like, hey, I just want to apologize to Miller. I didn't see what you were trying to get us to accomplish.
I thought you said that he was apologizing for the movie. Like,
no, he was apologizing to Miller, and Theron basically said the same thing of like, I just didn't, like, I couldn't visualize everything that you had in your head and what you were trying to put together, but you obviously, made it work. And
I think another thing that connects those three that you mentioned, and I know we're kind of going off a little bit, but those three movies, The Matrix or John Wick or Fury Road, they are the products of the creators having a passion for what they're making and being able to make those things.
Yeah, like you were saying, the guy who had obviously worked on all the stunt stuff for The Matrix is like, I'm going to make a movie that has the kind of fight choreography and action that I've wanted to see working on all these other projects, or like that is an extension of that, or like the Wachowskis having grown up on anime and martial arts movies and that kind of stuff.
Also struggling with identity for the entirety of their lives. Like,
yeah, so having a deep connection to the subject matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, for lack of a better word, it's heart.
Yeah.
Like, all those people had a lot of heart into those projects.
I mean, and that goes even further back than just within this like subsect that we're talking about. I mean, obviously you can see it in the differences between looking at like the original Star Wars trilogy versus the most recent projects that have come out. In some situations, the people who are at the helm of those things have a lot invested in it. It means a lot to them. And some people, it's another thing that puts food in their mouth, and that's the extent of it. It feels soulless by comparison.
Yeah. And who knows how much those are getting interfered with.
Yeah.
I'm sure probably a lot. And
But
I don't know how much these are. I never heard anything about.
Well, that's the other thing too, is I think, especially with this, it seems like he really was able to put his foot down and let this be his uncompromised vision of what this movie was going to be, and he had it in his head, and he was like, "This, we're gonna make this happen." And with so many setbacks too, they originally were going to film this entire movie in Australia, like they did the other ones, but there was uncharacteristic rainfall in Australia that actually made the deserts bloom out in wildflowers, so they couldn't film there. So then they had to go to Namibia and shoot
Africa.
and shoot in Africa, and hire like a British military security team, because their actors were being like robbed, like mugged in the town nearby that they were staying in, and there were all kinds of like dangerous situations they ran into. But everybody seemed, besides Tom Hardy and being kind of aloof or whatever and weird, everybody seemed to get along, and Riley Keough actually met her husband, who was one of the stunt coordinators on this, and they got married. And then there was one other couple, I forget, that met on this and got married as well.
That's cool.
I did want to talk briefly about, this movie was very well received critically and audience wise. People really, really loved it. But financially, it actually did end up losing money. It made a shit ton of money. It was the highest grossing Mad Max film with a worldwide take of $375 million. But because of how expensive the movie was to make and how big the marketing budget was, it still ended up losing $40 million.
Wow.
That's crazy. I want to say I saw this at least 2 or 3 times in theaters when it came.
Yeah, I think I saw it at least twice. Yeah, I'd love if they did a re-release. I'd be there.
Yeah,
in a heartbeat.
Yeah, if they did like a IMAX thing,
maybe. I will say, I mean, I know that we're all of the same mind in that a movie like this deserves the biggest screen for the biggest spectacle. But watching it at home with all the lights off on an OLED TV with Atmos sound, it was breathtaking.
Yeah, I just had my sister walk in at some point and just like throw a bunch of sand in my face. So I could really
it's 4D?
Yeah, so
that
I could really
4D.
feel like,
You're like, man, am I in LA right now? What's the weather like?
I smell gasoline. What is
yeah, just pouring gas out in the hallway. So
sprayed you with a water hose?
My last bit of trivia that I brought is I do have the full readout of what Max's back tattoo says. And it actually did solve a little that's a Cinema Sin plot hole thing with him giving his blood to Furiosa at the end
because he's AB negative.
He's a universal donor. Yeah. And they clarify that in the beginning.
But it's like good genital or something.
So the full tattoo is day 12,045. Height 10 hands, 180 pounds, no name, no lumps, no bumps, full life clear, 2 good eyes, no busted limbs, piss okay, genitals intact, multiple scars, heals fast, O negative, high octane, universal donor, lone road warrior, run down on the Powder Lakes V8, no guzzling, no supplies, isolate, psychotic, keep muzzled. So I think that pretty much sums up Max Rockatansky.
Yeah.
Super weird though.
Yeah, but I mean that's the stuff that I think really sets the Mad Max franchise apart is the weird stuff, the weird characters.
And I talked about it when we talked about the first one, and I think it holds true still, where there's a lot going on in this universe that we don't know, and George Miller doesn't spoon feed it to you. You got to try to figure shit out for your own. It makes you do a little bit of work as an audience member, and I think it works still because you're able to kind of piece this stuff together and stuff like that, where it's like, here's a brief glimpse of a tattoo. We're showing you some part of this world that you're never going to understand really, but it makes it feel more believable and whole.
It feels realized. It is a complete world, similar to like I'm making the connection to Star Wars a lot, but like how in the first few Star Wars films it felt like there was this living, breathing galaxy around what's happening
without over explanation.
Exactly. You don't need to know that Chewbacca is from Kashyyyk to know that there's a race that looks like him in this other place that has a well-structured hierarchy and all of these things. And I feel like it's very similar here, where you can see that there's these different, warring factions and tribes that live all over this, this desolate wasteland that all have different takes, and they all have different things that they bring to the table, and they're constantly fighting each other for supremacy. And I think that that's all really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I love that there's so much lore built into this that we never get explained, and I think it makes it for more enjoyable rewatches.
It also dawned on me, for whatever reason, it didn't dawn on me until this movie, that because they're in Australia, everyone there is just stuck in Australia just for fucking ever, because there's no planes. They can't fly to a different country and see if things are better there. And Australia is so far south compared to everything else. Like, good luck getting a boat to get. I mean, maybe but I doubt these guys can make an airtight thing that'll sail. But I was just like, damn, that's kind of a tragic idea that like ever since the world collapsed, like everybody, and that to me is why, because I think the thing that got me wondering that was that they continue to use Australian slang, which obviously is just George Miller putting in Australian slang. At one point, one of the brides says that Max is like like somebody who
skig,
like a skig who sucks schlanger, and schlanger
Yeah.
is Australian slang for dick.
Oh.
And I was like, why would 30, 40, whatever years after the world collapsed, would people, like everyone in this society, be using Australian slang? And then I was like, oh well, if nobody's been able to leave Australia for this many years and it's all just been like isolated here, it would make sense that they all just speak with that shared slang and combined with car lingo and all that kind of stuff.
Overall, I think I mean, 6 out of 5. This movie is fucking fantastic.
It's one of the best movies we've watched in a long time. I mean, we all had seen it several times before this, but it's...
Well, I mean, and if you want any more Fury Road talk, just go listen to literally every other Mad Max episode we did, where we just like couldn't help but comparing
like,
to this movie.
Fury Road's coming. Oh.
Yeah, we were all very excited for this, and it didn't disappoint.
Yeah,
and and I feel like I probably enjoyed it, more this time than I ever have, just because we had just watched all of these movies.
We have all the background.
Yeah, and we've had all this trivia, and I know more about George Miller and Australia. And
everybody agree though? 4, 2, 1, 3.
Oh, for the ranking?
Yes. I was like, are you counting down? Because that's fucked up.
Yeah, 4, 2, 1, 3 for sure. And I think that's how the majority of the world feels about these movies.
Maybe 3 and 1 switch on a weird.
Road Warrior had the
day.
top ranking for many years before this movie came out. But good for George Miller. I'm very interested and excited to see what Furiosa, the movie, brings to the table.
And potentially The Wasteland.
Yeah, and I would very much like to see. Miller did say that The Wasteland will be like a new story. It won't have Furiosa in it. It's going to be Max. He's like, because Max's bit is he goes to a new group of people and has a new adventure. So it'll be a new separate thing.
Yeah.
And do we know if Tom Hardy is supposed to reprise his role?
Yeah, he, at least as of 2015, had signed on to do 3 of them.
Oh.
Contracts do expire. So if they don't make one by a certain point, he could be out, but
I doubt after.
I don't think he's too busy right now.
Yeah, I doubt after.
He's got to make Venom.
Oh. I don't know if those are. I don't know how many of those are still happening or what the plan is there. But he definitely, I'm sure, knows that Mad Max is the more fruitful endeavor.
Yeah.
At least like emotionally.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for our March Madness. Want to give it one more last V8, fellas?
Madness!
Witness us next week when we talk about... We're doing Planet of the Apes, right?
We are doing Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, we're doing April.
Yeah, I was
Planet
going
of the
to...
Apes.
So
April.
Yeah. I'll ask you guys, which do you think is the better spin on this idea? Do you think Planet of the April makes more sense?
I think just
Or
April,
April
but
of
with
the
an E
Apes.
in the middle of it.
Okay, that's not... Yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
I like Planet of the April, and I think we can shorten to April.
What was the other one? I'm sorry.
April of the Apes.
April of the Apes.
I like Planet of the April.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good either way.
Let us know.
Yeah, sure.
We'll have decided without you anyway, but...
Yeah, so I think we're going to kick things off with, Rise? Is that right? Is that the first one in the Caesar trilogy?
Yeah. Rise, then Dawn, then War.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Rise and Dawn are like the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're
Wording-wise.
We're definitely going to cover the newer ones. I think it might be fun if we have the time to maybe throw in a couple of the older ones. We've covered the original, I think, in a Sci-Fi Redemption at some point.
At some point, and then I believe at some point you also watched the Tim Burton film.
I did.
We did talk
yeah.
about the Burton one too, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Apes.
Apes, Rise.
You damn
Check them
dirty
out.
ape.
And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode. I've been Tone.
I've been John.
And these are my friends Barry and Larry and Internet Darling Anthony.
See you next time.
Keep it creepy.